They say the devil doesn't come dressed in a red cape with pointy horns. No, the devil comes wearing a perfectly pressed Talbot sundress, carrying a tray of store-bought organic cupcakes for the PTA bake sale, and smiling a smile that doesn't quite reach her eyes. My name is Clara. I'm 62 years old, a retired cardiac nurse, and a woman who has lived in the heart of Atlanta long enough to know when the humidity is about to break into a thunderstorm and when somebody is lying straight to my face. I raised 2 boys on my own after my husband, God rest his soul, passed away too early. I worked double shifts, stretched a single dollar until it hollered, and built a home founded on truth, hard work, and the grace of God. My oldest, Marcus, is a brilliant software engineer. The boy can write code that practically sings, but when it comes to matters of the heart, he's as naive as a newborn calf. Then there's my youngest, David. He's a pilot for Delta Airlines. He got his daddy's sharp eyes and my low tolerance for nonsense. I love my boys fiercely, and because I love them, I try, Lord knows I try, to love the women they choose. That brings me to Monique, Marcus's wife, the mother of my sweet 6-year-old grandson, Leo. If you looked at Monique's Instagram, you'd think she invented motherhood. She was the quintessential modern soccer mom. Her hair was always laid perfectly, her nails were always done in a tasteful French tip, and her house looked like it belonged in the centerfold of a home decor magazine. She was polished, too polished, but Marcus adored her. He looked at her like she hung the moon and the stars, working 80-hour weeks just to keep her wrapped in the lifestyle she felt she deserved. I kept my mouth shut. That's what a good mother-in-law does, right? You smile, you nod, and you bite your tongue until it bleeds. But a mother's intuition is a quiet alarm bell that never truly powers off. And on a muggy Thursday afternoon in late September, that alarm didn't just ring, it shattered the glass. It was around 4 o'clock. The Georgia sun was baking the asphalt outside, but inside my kitchen, it was a sanctuary of comfort. I was standing at the butcher block island, aggressively rubbing my secret blend of smoked paprika, brown sugar, cayenne, and garlic powder into a massive rack of pork ribs. Marcus and his family were coming over for our traditional Thursday night dinner. Cooking was my love language, and those southern BBQ ribs were Marcus's absolute favorite. Monique, despite her constant chatter about green juice and wellness retreats, could never resist them either. She'd always eat at least 3, wiping the sticky molasses sauce from her manicured fingers and asking for the recipe, a recipe I swore I'd take to my grave. The house was quiet, save for the rhythmic thump, thump, thump of my meat tenderizer and the soft hum of the central air conditioning. Then the landline rang. Not my cell phone. The old, heavy landline mounted on the kitchen wall. Only one person ever called that number anymore. I wiped my hands on my apron, a faded yellow thing embroidered with daisies, and picked up the receiver. Hello? Mom? It was David. The connection was crystal clear, but his voice sounded strange. Tight, like a guitar string wound one twist away from snapping. David, baby. Where are you? I thought you were flying out of JFK today. I cradled the phone between my shoulder and my ear, reaching for a damp cloth to wipe the spice mix off my knuckles. I am, Mom. I'm at JFK. My flight to London Heathrow pushes back in 45 minutes. He paused, and I could hear the muted chaos of the airport terminal buzzing in the background, the screech of luggage wheels, the garbled intercom announcements. Mom, is Marcus home? No, honey, he's at the tech campus. He won't be off until 5:30. Monique dropped Leo off at soccer practice and came over here early to help me prep. I glanced toward the ceiling. I could hear the faint, steady drumming of water running in the guest bathroom upstairs. She's taking a quick shower right now. Said she was sweating from the afternoon heat. Why? Is everything all right? There was a silence on the line. It wasn't a normal conversational pause. It was a heavy, suffocating silence that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. David? I prompted, my voice dropping an octave. Talk to me. Mom! That's impossible, David whispered. The background noise of the airport seemed to fade away, leaving only the chilling certainty in his voice. Monique isn't in your shower. I let out a short, dismissive laugh. Boy, are you trying to tell me who is and isn't in my own house? I literally just handed her a fresh towel 10 minutes ago. She's wearing that blue floral sundress she bought last week. I heard her walk up the stairs. Mom, listen to me, David said, his tone turning fiercely authoritative, the voice of a man who commands a commercial jetliner. I am standing at gate B24, I am staring at the first-class boarding lane. Monique is standing not 30 feet away from me. She just handed her passport to the gate agent. My hand froze in midair. The damp cloth slipped from my fingers, hitting the linoleum floor with a soft, wet slap. David, you've been working too many hours. Your eyes are playing tricks on you. There are a lot of light-skinned black women with bob cuts in New York City. It's her, Mom. I swear to God. She's wearing a designer trench coat, big sunglasses, and she's holding that obnoxious bright red Birkin bag Marcus bought her for their anniversary. The one you said looked like a glorified fire extinguisher. My heart did a strange, uncomfortable stutter step in my chest. He remembered the bag. I called out to her. David continued, his voice dropping even lower, laced with a mixture of anger and disbelief. I yelled, Monique! She froze. Mom! I saw her shoulders tense. She turned her head just a fraction, saw me, and then completely ignored me. She grabbed the arm of the guy she's with, and they practically ran down the jet bridge. The kitchen suddenly felt too hot. The smell of the BBQ spices, warm and inviting a moment ago, suddenly felt cloying, almost nauseating. The guy she's with? I echoed, my throat suddenly dry as desert sand. An older white guy, silver hair, expensive tailored suit, looked like a Wall Street banker. They were holding hands. He kissed her on the cheek right before they handed over their tickets. She's getting on my flight to London. I stared at the ceiling. The water was still running upstairs. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. David, I breathed, my voice barely a whisper. If Monique is getting on a plane to London with a strange man, then who in the hell is in my house? I don't know, Mom, David replied, sounding genuinely frightened for me. But you need to be careful. Do you want me to call the police? I can have Marcus rush over there. No, I said instantly, the matriarch in me snapping to attention. 40 years of nursing taught me how to handle an emergency. You don't panic. You observe. You triage. No, do not call Marcus. Not yet. If he comes rushing in here blind, he'll do something foolish. And we have no proof. If you confront her on that plane, she'll deny it, put her sunglasses back on, and make you look like a crazy person. So what do? You fly your plane, I commanded, staring hard at the hallway that led to the stairs. You keep your head down, you do your job, and you see if you can find out who that man is. Get a name. Get a picture if you can without her seeing. Let me handle things on this end. Mom, I don't like this. You're alone with a stranger. I am a 62-year-old woman who survived the night shift in the ER during the 90s, David. I am not afraid of a woman in a sundress. I will call you when you land. I hung up the phone. The click of the receiver settling into its cradle sounded like a gunshot in the quiet kitchen. I stood there for a long moment, my hands gripping the edge of the butcher block until my knuckles ached. The water upstairs finally stopped. The pipes groaned. My mind raced, flipping through a Rolodex of logic. Was David mistaken? It was possible. Stress, fatigue, a trick of the light at the airport. But David had 20/20 vision and an attention to detail that kept hundreds of people safe in the sky every day. If he said it was Monique, it was Monique. But that meant the woman upstairs, the woman who had walked into my kitchen, kissed my cheek, and complained about the Atlanta traffic just 20 minutes ago, was an imposter. How? How could someone look so exactly like my daughter-in-law that they could walk into my home in broad daylight and fool me? It wasn't just the face. It was the hair, the body type, the walk. It sounded like one of those ridiculous soap operas I used to watch while folding laundry. The whole evil twin sister routine. But this wasn't television. This was my kitchen. This was my son's life. I heard the bathroom door open upstairs. Soft footsteps began descending the carpeted stairs. I took a deep, steadying breath, adjusting my apron. I forced my heart to slow its frantic beating. I put on my best, most welcoming grandmother smile. Let the games begin, I thought. Whew, that feels so much better, a voice chimed as she walked into the kitchen. I turned. She was toweling off her hair, wearing the exact blue floral sundress Monique had arrived in. Her skin was the same beautiful caramel tone. Her facial features, the high cheekbones, the shape of her eyes, the full lips, were practically identical to the woman in Marcus's wedding photos. If you put them side by side in a dim room, you wouldn't know the difference. But the devil is in the details, and I have always been a detail-oriented woman. You look refreshed, sweetheart, I said smoothly, turning back to the rib so she wouldn't see the intense scrutiny in my eyes. Water temperature okay? Perfect, Mama Clara, she said. She walked over and leaned against the counter. Strike one. Monique never called me Mama Clara. She always called me Clara. And on the rare occasion she was trying to butter me up, she called me Mother Brooks. Only my nieces and nephews called me Mama Clara. I kept my face blank, continuing to rub the spice mix into the meat. Good, I hummed. Marcus should be here in about an hour. He texted saying traffic on the I-285 is a nightmare. I'm just getting these ribs ready for the oven. She looked down at the massive rack of pork. A subtle, almost imperceptible wrinkle formed on her nose. It was a look of mild disgust. Oh, right, ribs, she said, her voice lacking any enthusiasm. Smells strong. Strike two. The real Monique might pretend to be a health guru online, but put a rack of my ribs in front of her, and her eyes would light up like a child on Christmas morning. She would be hovering over my shoulder, trying to steal a pinch of the dry rub. This woman looked at the meat like it was a biology experiment. You usually love my ribs, I noted casually, picking up my meat tenderizer and giving a stubborn piece of cartilage a sharp whack. The sudden noise made her flinch. Oh, I do, she corrected quickly, offering a bright plastic smile. It's just, I started that new keto diet this week. Marcus didn't tell you? I'm trying to cut back on heavy sauces and pork. I think I'll just have a salad tonight. Let Marcus have my portion. The real Monique had abandoned the keto diet 3 months ago because it made her break out. I knew this because she had complained about it loudly during Sunday service. Is that so? I said softly. Well, I'll make sure to toss some extra greens for you. I wiped my hands on a fresh towel and walked around the island to where she was standing. Come here, let me fix your collar. It's folded inward. Before she could protest, I stepped into her personal space. I reached up, adjusting the fabric around the nape of her neck. It was an excuse to get close. Very close. I inhaled deeply through my nose. Monique wore Tom Ford's Black Orchid. It was a heavy, luxurious, distinct scent. It cost $200 a bottle, and it lingered in a room long after she left it. It was sophisticated and commanding. The woman standing in front of me smelled like vanilla body mist from Bath and Body Works. It was sweet, cloying, and undeniably cheap. Strike three. My blood ran cold, but my hands remained steady. I smoothed her collar and took a step back, smiling warmly. There you go. Perfect. Thanks, she said, looking slightly uncomfortable under my gaze. She pulled out her phone, Monique's phone, an iPhone in a rose gold case, and started tapping on the screen. I'm just going to text Marcus and see how far away he is. I watched her type. The real Monique was a furious texter, using both thumbs in a rapid-fire blur. This woman was typing with her right index finger, holding the phone awkwardly in her left hand. She wasn't Monique. My son had just boarded a plane with the real Monique, and an imposter was standing in my kitchen, wearing my daughter-in-law's clothes, holding her phone, and preparing to sit at my dinner table. A slow, simmering anger began to bubble deep in my gut. It wasn't a hot, explosive rage. It was a cold, calculating fury. The kind of anger that moves mountains. Someone was playing a deeply twisted game with my family. They thought they could slip a stranger into my home, right under my nose, and I wouldn't notice? They thought I was just some clueless old woman who only cared about baking pies and watching daytime TV? They had chosen the wrong house, and they had definitely chosen the wrong matriarch. I'm going to put some music on while I finish up, I announced, walking over to the vintage record player sitting on the credenza in the dining room. It was my prized possession. I flipped through my vinyl collection and pulled out Aretha Franklin's Spirit in the Dark. I set the needle down, and the crackle of the vinyl was soon replaced by the undeniable soul-stirring piano intro of Don't Play That Song. Music is the soul's fingerprint. You can fake a smile, you can fake a dress, but you can't fake the rhythm that lives in your bones. Whenever I played Aretha, the real Monique couldn't help herself. She'd always snap her fingers or do a little two-step shimmy by the fridge. It was an unconscious reaction, a piece of genuine black joy that her curated Instagram persona couldn't suppress. The music swelled, filling the house with Aretha's powerful vocals. Don't play that song for me. It brings back memories. I turned back to the kitchen, leaning against the counter, and watched her. She didn't move. She didn't tap her foot. She didn't hum. She didn't even look up from the phone. She just stood there, swiping mindlessly on the screen, completely disconnected from the heavy soul music vibrating through the floorboards. She looked like an actress waiting for her next cue, completely oblivious to the culture of the character she was supposed to be playing. The seed of doubt David had planted on the phone had fully blossomed into a terrifying reality. My mind began to race, clicking pieces into a jigsaw puzzle that still had too many empty spaces. If this wasn't a twin sister, and I knew Marcus would have told me if his wife was a twin, then who was she? A look-alike hired off the internet? A struggling actress? And more importantly, why? If Monique just wanted to cheat on Marcus, why go through the elaborate, expensive trouble of hiring a decoy to sit in my kitchen? Why not just lie and say she was on a business trip? Unless she needed Marcus to believe she was physically present in Atlanta. She needed an alibi. But an alibi for what? You don't need a body double just to have an affair. You need a body double when you are committing a crime and need airtight proof that you were somewhere else. The sound of a car engine pulling into the driveway broke my train of thought. "Oh, Marcus is here," the imposter said cheerfully, finally looking up from her phone. She walked toward the front hallway to greet him, her hips swaying in an exaggerated, unnatural imitation of Monique's confident strut. I took a deep breath, letting the smell of the barbecue sauce ground me. I needed to play the long game. I couldn't confront her now, not with Marcus walking through the door. My son was a good man, but he was blind when it came to his wife. If I pointed my finger and accused the woman standing in front of him of being an imposter, he would look at me like I had lost my mind. He'd see the face, the dress, the phone, and he'd think his mother had finally slipped into dementia. Worse, if I spooked the imposter, she would warn the real Monique. I'd lose the element of surprise, and whatever trap my daughter-in-law was setting for my son would snap shut before I could dismantle it. No, I had to be smarter than them. I had to smile. I had to serve dinner. I had to watch this fake Monique interact with my son, observing every fake kiss, every forced laugh, and every lie she spun at my dining room table. "Hey, Mama!" Marcus's voice boomed from the hallway. A second later, he walked into the kitchen, looking exhausted but happy. His tie was loosened, his briefcase slung over his shoulder. He walked right past the imposter and came straight to me, wrapping his arms around my shoulders and planting a kiss on my cheek. "Smells incredible in here. Tell me you made the ribs." "You know I did, baby," I smiled, patting his cheek. My heart ached looking at him. He looked so tired, working himself to the bone for a woman who was currently flying across the Atlantic with someone else. Marcus turned to the imposter. "Hey, babe, how was Leo's practice?" He leaned in and kissed her on the lips. I watched closely. The imposter didn't recoil, but her body stiffened slightly. It was the rigid posture of someone performing a chore, not receiving affection from their husband. Marcus, bless his tired heart, didn't notice a thing. He just sighed contentedly, slipping his arm around her waist. "Practice was great," the imposter chirped flawlessly. "He scored a goal. Coach said he's improving." It was a perfect, generic answer. "Awesome," Marcus grinned. He looked at me. "I'm gonna go wash up. Starving." As he bounded up the stairs, the imposter turned back to me, the plastic smile still plastered on her face. "Can I help you set the table, Clara?" She remembered to drop the Mama Clara this time. She was adjusting her performance. "That would be lovely," I said, handing her a stack of ceramic plates. Our fingers brushed briefly. Hers were cold. As she walked into the dining room, I picked up the heavy carving knife to slice the ribs. The steel felt cool and solid in my hand. I looked at the reflection of my dark eyes in the blade. Monique thought she was clever. She thought she had outsmarted a busy husband and an old woman from the South. But she forgot one fundamental truth. You can hire an actress to wear your clothes. You can pay someone to mimic your voice. But you can never, ever replicate the soul of a family. And you certainly do not bring your deception into the kitchen of a black mother who has spent her entire life protecting her flock. The war had just begun, and the devil didn't even know I had drafted the battle plans. Here is the detailed continuation of your story, Part 2, written in English. I have maintained Clara's first-person perspective, focusing heavily on her internal monologue, the pacing of the suspense, and rich sensory details to hit your desired length and emotional depth. Dinner that Thursday night was an exercise in psychological warfare. I sat at the head of my mahogany dining table, carving the ribs and serving the collard greens while watching a stranger wear my daughter-in-law's face. Marcus, bless his exhausted, hard-working heart, ate his food and talked about his software launch, completely oblivious to the fact that the woman nodding beside him was giving a rehearsed performance. When they finally packed up Leo and left around 9 o'clock, I didn't go to sleep. I sat in my armchair in the dark living room, a cup of chamomile tea going cold in my hands, waiting for the sun to rise. I had a mission now. I wasn't just a mother anymore. I was a detective. Friday morning broke with the thick, humid heat that Atlanta is famous for. By 9, Marcus was already at his office campus downtown, and Leo was at school. I knew from Monique's meticulously curated shared Google Calendar that today was her self-care Friday, a block of time supposedly dedicated to the spa, followed by a light lunch with the PTA board. I grabbed my purse, got into my trusty navy blue Honda Accord, and drove the 20 minutes to their house in Buckhead. I had a spare key. I was the grandmother. It was perfectly normal for me to drop by to check the mail or drop off some extra food. I unlocked the heavy oak front door and stepped into the foyer. The house was dead quiet. It was beautiful, but it had always felt sterile to me. All white marble, sharp glass edges, and minimalist furniture. It didn't look like a place where a family lived. It looked like a museum exhibit. "Monique?" I called out, my voice echoing off the high ceilings. Nothing. Good. The imposter was out. I walked straight up the floating wooden staircase and pushed open the door to the master bedroom. My heart was thumping against my ribs, a steady, heavy beat that reminded me of my days doing chest compressions in the ER. "Stay calm, Clara," I told myself. "Breathe in, breathe out. Look for the anomalies." I started with the obvious places. The nightstands, the vanity, the massive walk-in closet. Everything was perfectly organized, color-coded, and flawless. But criminals, liars, and cheats always make one mistake. They underestimate the persistence of an older woman who knows how to deep clean a room. I moved to the king-sized bed. It was perfectly made, tight as a military cot. I ran my hands along the edges of the mattress, lifting the heavy duvet. Nothing. I checked under the bed. Just a few dust bunnies. I stood up, putting my hands on my hips, scanning the room. Where would you hide something you needed to access every day, but didn't want a husband to find? My eyes landed on a velvet ottoman sitting at the foot of the bed. It was a decorative piece, meant for sitting while tying shoes. I walked over and pushed it. It was heavier than it looked. I ran my fingers along the seam just under the cushion and felt a small, hard lip. It was a storage ottoman. I popped the lid open. Inside, nestled beneath a folded cashmere throw blanket, was a thick manila folder and a sleek black smartphone. I pulled the folder out first. It was heavy. I opened it and felt a chill run down my spine that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. It was a dossier. A complete, terrifyingly detailed character study of my daughter-in-law, written like a theatrical script. Target: Monique Brooks. Age: 34. Voice: alto, slight vocal fry at the end of sentences. Laughs from the chest, not the throat. Physical tics: touches left collarbone when pretending to listen. Crosses right leg over left when sitting. Husband: Marcus. Call him Babe or Mark. Do not engage in deep conversations about his work. Nod and say, "That sounds so stressful, honey." Mother-in-law: Clara. Avoid extended contact. She is sharp. Keep conversations to Leo and recipes. I stared at that last line, my jaw clenched so tight my teeth ached. She is sharp. Well, at least the real Monique had the sense to warn her little actress about me. I flipped through the pages. There were schedules, maps of Leo's school drop-off zones, names and photos of the PTA mothers to memorize. It was a manual on how to steal a woman's life for a few hours a day. Next, I picked up the black smartphone. It wasn't an iPhone like Monique normally used. It was an expensive Android model. I pressed the power button. To my surprise, there was no passcode. It opened directly to a photo gallery. My stomach dropped as I clicked on the first video. It was Monique. The real Monique. She was sitting in what looked exactly like this very bedroom, wearing a silk robe. She looked directly into the camera and smiled her brilliant, blinding smile. "Hey, babe," the digital Monique said, her voice smooth and loving. "I know you're busy at the office. Just wanted to say I love you. Leo is asleep and I'm just about to do a face mask and get into bed. Can't wait for you to get home. Miss you." I swiped to the next video. Hi, honey, I'm just leaving the PTA meeting. God, Linda was being so annoying today. I'm going to grab a green juice and head home. See you at 6. There were dozens of them, pre-recorded snippets of a perfect wife sitting in various rooms of the house wearing different outfits. But as I squinted at the screen, my eyes, trained to look for the faintest flutter of a patient's pulse, caught the anomaly. In the video where she was supposedly in the kitchen, the sunlight reflecting off the marble island didn't match the shadows on her face. Her hair seemed to blur slightly at the edges where it met the background. It was a deep fake. I watched the evening news. I know what AI can do these days. You can make the president say he loves tap dancing if you have the right software. Monique was using a green screen or an app to digitally place herself inside her Atlanta home, recording these video messages to send to Marcus while she was God knows where with that silver-haired man. The strategy was brutally genius. The actress, the imposter in the floral sundress, was hired to be the physical body. She did the chores, showed her face at the school gates, and maintained the illusion for the neighbors. But when it came to direct communication with Marcus during the day, the real Monique used this burner phone to send pre-recorded AI-generated videos. By the time Marcus came home at night, the real Monique had flown back, slipping into bed beside him. No wonder my son hadn't noticed. The woman he slept next to, the woman he kissed goodnight, was actually his wife. The deception only happened in the daylight. I took out my own phone and quickly took pictures of the script and recorded the deepfake videos off the burner phone's screen. I needed evidence. Once I had everything, I placed the folder and the phone exactly as I had found them, smoothed down the cashmere blanket, and closed the ottoman. I left the house without leaving a single trace. I sat in my Honda Accord down the street, parked under the shade of an old oak tree, and waited. At exactly 1:15 p.m., the front door opened. The imposter walked out. She was wearing a chic yoga outfit, carrying Monique's gym bag, her face obscured by oversized Gucci sunglasses. She climbed into Monique's pristine white Range Rover and pulled out of the driveway. I put my car in drive and let 2 other cars get between us before I followed. Tailing someone is not like the movies. It is agonizingly slow, stressful work. My hands were gripping the steering wheel so hard they cramped. We drove south, leaving the manicured lawns of Buckhead behind, moving toward the grittier artistic districts of East Atlanta Village. The Range Rover finally turned down a narrow alley behind a row of dilapidated brick buildings. I parked my Accord on the main street and walked the rest of the way, keeping close to the brick walls, my sensible sneakers making no sound on the pavement. I peeked around the corner. The Range Rover was parked near a heavy steel door propped open by a cinder block. Above the door, a faded peeling sign read, "The Black Box, Independent Community Theater." I crept closer, slipping inside the dark, dusty hallway. The smell of stale popcorn, sweat, and old stage paint hit my nose. I followed the sound of voices toward the main stage area, hiding myself behind a heavy velvet curtain that smelled like a thrift store. I peered through a gap in the fabric. The imposter was standing on the small, unlit stage, but she wasn't Monique anymore. She had thrown the Gucci sunglasses onto a folding chair. She reached up to her head and unclipped a massive, perfectly styled wig, pulling it off to reveal her natural hair, shorter, tightly coiled, and pinned flat to her scalp. She grabbed a makeup wipe from a duffel bag and vigorously scrubbed her face, wiping away the heavy contouring that made her cheekbones look exactly like my daughter-in-law's. Under the harsh work lights of the theater, her posture changed completely. The confident, arrogant swagger of a wealthy Buckhead housewife melted away. Her shoulders slumped. She suddenly looked very young, very tired, and incredibly stressed. A young man with dreadlocks and a clipboard walked out from the wings. "Hey, Keisha," he said, handing her a bottle of water. "You look beat. How's the corporate gig?" Keisha, that was her name. Keisha took a long swig of the water and let out an exhausted sigh. "It's exhausting, Ty. I swear, playing Lady Macbeth was easier than playing a rich suburban housewife who hates carbs." Ty laughed, leaning against the stage monitor. "Hey, you can't complain. $3,000 a week is insane. Are you sure it's legal, though? Sounds sketchy as hell." Keisha rubbed her temples. "She told me she's a high-level security consultant for the government. Said she needs a decoy to live her civilian life while she travels for classified meetings, so her husband and kid don't become targets for foreign agents. She even showed me a fake CIA badge tie. It looked real enough to me." "And you believed that?" I believe the direct deposit that hits my checking account every Friday morning, Keisha snapped back, though her voice lacked real heat. Look, Ty, you know my mom is looking at eviction next month if I don't come up with the back rent. This job is saving my family. All I have to do is wear itchy clothes, go to the grocery store, smile at a bunch of uptight white women at the PTA, and avoid the mother-in-law. The mother-in-law bad? Keisha shuddered. Terrifying. The woman has eyes like an eagle. She looked at me yesterday while carving a rack of ribs, and I swear to God I thought she was going to carve me next. I'm just glad I don't have to interact with the husband. As long as I'm out of the house by 5, the agent takes over the night shift. Behind the curtain, I closed my eyes and let out a slow, silent breath. The anger that had been boiling inside me began to shift. It didn't disappear, but it focused. Keisha wasn't a mastermind. She wasn't an evil twin sister or a homewrecker trying to steal Marcus away. She was a desperate, broke theater actress who was gullible enough to believe a ridiculous James Bond story because she needed to keep a roof over her mother's head. I knew what desperation tasted like. I had been a single mother struggling to pay the light bill. I knew the lengths a woman would go to protect her own. Monique had preyed on this girl's poverty. She had used Keisha's desperation to buy herself a flawless alibi, turning an innocent, struggling artist into an unwitting accomplice in her betrayal. I looked at Keisha again. Stripped of the expensive clothes and the makeup, she didn't look like my enemy. She looked like a pawn on a chessboard, about to be sacrificed by a queen who didn't care who she destroyed. I stepped back from the curtain, silently retreating down the dark hallway and out into the blazing Atlanta sun. I walked back to my car, my mind spinning with this new revelation. I had the who and the how. I knew Keisha was the body double, and I knew Monique was using deepfakes and burner phones to maintain the digital lie. But the biggest, most dangerous piece of the puzzle was still missing. Why? If Monique just wanted to sleep with that silver-haired man on the plane, she didn't need to go to these extremes. She could have claimed she had a weekend girls' trip. She could have lied about a business conference. You don't build a fortress of lies this elaborate and spend $3,000 a week on an actress just to cover up a simple affair. No, this level of deception required a massive payoff, something life-altering. I started the engine of my Accord, gripping the steering wheel. David's voice echoed in my head. An older white guy, silver hair, expensive tailored suit, looked like a Wall Street banker. If that man wasn't just a lover, what was he? My blood ran cold as a horrific thought struck me. Marcus and Monique had recently refinanced the house. Marcus had mentioned casually a few weeks ago that Monique was handling some new investments for their retirement portfolio. He had given her full access to the joint accounts, trusting her completely with the money he had broken his back to earn. I slammed my foot on the gas pedal. I didn't just need to expose an affair anymore. I needed to stop a robbery. And to do that, I couldn't just fight Monique. I was going to need an inside woman. I looked in my rearview mirror as I drove away from the theater. Don't worry, Keisha, I thought grimly. You're about to get the role of a lifetime. Here is the detailed continuation for Part 3, bringing the story to its first major climax and revealing the devastating financial twist. I have maintained Clara's fierce, protective voice and the slow burn suspense to hit the depth and length you need. The weekend was an exercise in pure, agonizing discipline. Sunday dinner was the hardest performance of my life. I sat at my dining table, passing the mashed potatoes to the imposter, watching Marcus kiss her cheek, and listening to her complain about the price of organic strawberries. I smiled. I nodded. I played the part of the clueless, loving grandmother to perfection, but underneath the table, my fingernails were biting so hard into my palms they drew blood. I didn't sleep Sunday night. You don't sleep when there's a wolf in the house. You sharpen your knives. Monday morning arrived with a gray, overcast sky that promised a heavy downpour. I waited until I knew Marcus had left for his tech campus, and Leo had been dropped off at his elementary school. At exactly 9:30 a.m., I pulled my Honda Accord into their Buckhead driveway. I didn't use my spare key this time. I walked up the manicured stone path and rang the doorbell. I wanted her to open it. I wanted to look her in the eye the moment she realized the game was over. It took nearly a minute, but the heavy oak door finally swung open. Mama Clara, Keisha beamed, stepping back to let me in. She was wearing Monique's expensive Lululemon leggings and a fitted white tank top, her hair styled in Monique's signature sleek bob. She was holding a green smoothie in one hand. What a surprise. I wasn't expecting you today. I know you weren't, sweetheart, I said, stepping into the grand foyer. I didn't return her smile. My voice was calm, flat, and carried the weight of an anvil. I walked past her, heading straight for the kitchen. Keisha closed the door and followed me, her heels clicking nervously against the hardwood floor. Is everything okay? She asked, her voice raising a slight artificial octave to mimic Monique's concern. Did Marcus forget something? I can run it down to the office for him if you... I stopped dead in the center of the kitchen, right next to the massive marble island. I turned around slowly and looked at her. I didn't look at the expensive clothes, or the meticulously contoured makeup, or the wig that cost more than my first car. I looked straight through all of it, right into the terrified eyes of the young, broke theater actress I had seen scrubbing her face backstage in East Atlanta. You can drop the act, Keisha, I said softly. The green smoothie slipped from her fingers. The glass hit the imported Italian tile and shattered with a violent explosive crack. Thick green liquid splattered across the floor, coating her bare ankles, but she didn't even flinch. She just stood there, frozen, the blood draining from her face so fast she looked like a ghost. I don't know what you're talking about, she stammered, her voice trembling. She instinctively reached up to touch her left collarbone, the exact physical tick written in the dossier. Mama Clara, it's me, Monique. I reached into my leather purse and pulled out my phone. I tapped the screen and slid it across the cold marble island toward her. It was a clear, zoomed-in photograph of her sitting backstage at the Black Box Theater, stripping off her wig. Your name is Keisha, I stated, my voice echoing in the dead silence of the kitchen. You are an actress. You get paid $3,000 a week to wear my daughter-in-law's clothes, live in her house, and deceive my son. And right now, you are standing in a puddle of kale and lies, trying to figure out if you're about to go to federal prison. Keisha stared at the phone. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish suffocating on dry land. The pristine, confident posture of the Buckhead housewife collapsed in an instant. Her shoulders curled inward, her hands began to shake violently, and suddenly, she wasn't Monique anymore. She was just a terrified girl. Please, Keisha whispered, tears immediately welling in her eyes. Mrs. Brooks, please, you don't understand. I'm not doing anything wrong. She told me she works for the government. She told me she's an undercover security consultant. She said if I didn't act as her decoy, her family would be in danger from foreign agents. I stared at her for 5 long seconds. Then I let out a harsh, humorless laugh that bounced off the stainless steel appliances. Foreign agents? I repeated, my voice dripping with pure Southern disdain. Child, my daughter-in-law can't even assemble an IKEA nightstand without having a meltdown, and you think she's James Bond? She showed me a badge, Keisha sobbed, wrapping her arms around her stomach as if she were going to be sick. She had a badge and a classified dossier. I just needed the money, Mrs. Brooks. My mom is going to be evicted. I swear to God, I thought I was protecting your family. You're not protecting my family, I snapped, stepping closer, my voice dropping to a fierce, guttural whisper. You are helping a cheating, manipulative woman dismantle my son's life while she flies off to Europe with her lover. Keisha gasped, her eyes widening in genuine shock. Lover? No, she said she was in D.C. doing debriefings. She's in London, I corrected sharply, with a silver-haired man, while you stand here playing house. Keisha's knees gave out. She sank to the floor, right into the spilled smoothie, burying her face in her hands. She cried, loud, ugly, heaving sobs of a girl who realized she had been conned into becoming a villain. I looked down at her. Part of me wanted to yell. Part of me wanted to drag her out of the house by her ear. But the nurse in me, the woman who had spent 40 years calming down panicking patients, knew that screaming wouldn't stop the bleeding. I grabbed a roll of paper towels, tore off a thick wad, and knelt down next to her on the floor. I didn't comfort her, but I handed her the towels. Wipe your face, I commanded, and listen to me very carefully. Keisha took the towels, scrubbing her eyes, ruining the expensive makeup. She looked at me, terrified. I am not your enemy, Keisha, I said, my tone softening just a fraction, but remaining unyielding. I know about your mother. I know about the eviction. Monique targeted you because you were vulnerable. She used your poverty as a weapon against my family. But right now, you have a choice. You can pack your bags, run out that door, and when I call the police, You will go down as a co-conspirator to whatever fraud my daughter-in-law is committing. Or... I paused, leaning in closer. You can help me tear her operation to the ground. Keisha sniffled, looking at the sharp, uncompromising resolve in my eyes. Help you? How? First, you're going to show me everything on that burner phone, I said, standing up and offering her my hand. Keisha hesitated for only a second before taking my hand. I pulled her up. It's upstairs, she whispered, her voice raw. In the ottoman. I know where it is, I said. Let's go. We marched up the floating staircase together, stepping into the master bedroom. Keisha went straight to the velvet ottoman, popped it open, and handed me the black Android phone. It doesn't have a passcode for the home screen, Keisha explained, her voice shaky. She told me I only needed to open it to press play on the deepfake videos if Marcus asked to FaceTime while he was on his lunch break. I just hold this phone up to my laptop camera, and the app tracks my facial movements and projects her face onto the screen. It's terrifyingly real. I saw them, I muttered, taking the phone. I swiped past the photo gallery and the video folder I had seen on Friday. I wasn't interested in the fake videos anymore. I needed the real data. I opened the app drawer. Most of it was standard: weather, calculator, basic browser. But hidden in a folder labeled Utilities, there was an email icon with a small lock symbol on it. A secure encrypted email server. I tapped it. A password prompt popped up. Do you know the password? I asked. Keisha shook her head frantically. No, I swear. I only know how to use the video app. I stared at the blinking cursor. Monique was arrogant, but she was also deeply vain. People who think they are smarter than everyone else rarely create complex passwords. They create passwords based on their own egos. I tried her birthday. Incorrect. I tried Leo's birthday. Incorrect. I tried the date of her wedding to Marcus. Incorrect. I stopped thinking about the woman I knew. What did Monique value most? Not her husband, not her child. I typed in, London 2026. The screen flashed red. Incorrect. I gritted my teeth. I looked at the dossier Keisha had left in the ottoman. I looked at the expensive clothes, the red Birkin bag sitting on the vanity. I thought about what David had said on the phone. He looked like a Wall Street banker. I typed in the name of the perfume she always wore, the one she loved more than anything. Black Orchid Dellers. The lock icon spun, turned green, and the inbox opened. Got it, I whispered, the victory feeling cold in my chest. Keisha leaned over my shoulder as I scrolled through the inbox. There were dozens of emails, all from a single sender, C. Sterling. I clicked on the oldest email, dated 6 months ago. It was a long, flowery message filled with financial jargon and romantic manipulation. My dearest Monique, the email read, the portfolio we discussed is yielding unprecedented returns. The offshore accounts are set up and waiting for the initial capital. Marcus is holding you back, my love. A woman of your caliber shouldn't be tied to a mid-level tech salary in Atlanta. Once the capital is secured, we will finalize the property in Mayfair. I need you here with me. Oh my God, Keisha gasped, reading over my shoulder. She really is having an affair. Keep reading, I ordered, my eyes scanning the next few emails. The tone shifted as the months progressed. The romance took a back seat to urgent financial instructions. Charles Sterling wasn't just a lover. He was orchestrating a massive transfer of wealth. My son's wealth. I clicked on an email with an attachment labeled escrow_release_docs.pdf. As the document loaded on the screen, my heart slammed against my ribs so hard it physically hurt. It was a home equity line of credit, HELOC, approval form. Monique had taken out a second mortgage on the house. This house, the home Marcus had poured his life savings into. And because Marcus trusted her implicitly, he had signed a generic power of attorney for her to handle their portfolio diversification. She had used it to drain the equity of the house entirely, $750,000. But it didn't stop there. I opened the next email, dated just 3 days ago. Transfer protocol initiated, Charles had written. The 401k liquidation clears on Wednesday. The HELOC funds are already in the holding account. Once you land in London on Friday, we will execute the final wire transfer to the Cayman Trust. We disappear, darling. Untraceable. The phone slipped slightly in my sweaty palm. I felt dizzy. The air in the room suddenly felt too thin to breathe. Mrs. Brooks? Keisha asked, catching my arm to steady me. What is it? What does that mean? It means, I choked out, a wave of profound nausea washing over me, that my daughter-in-law isn't just leaving my son, she is ruining him. I looked around the beautiful, pristine bedroom. The marble, the expensive rugs, the custom furniture. It was all a mirage. The house was underwater. The retirement Marcus had slaved 80-hour weeks to build was gone. Monique had systematically liquidated every asset my son had, converting his blood, sweat, and tears into cash for a man named Charles Sterling. She was going to leave Marcus with a massive unpayable debt, a foreclosed home, and a broken heart. It was a scorched earth betrayal. Charles Sterling was a professional parasite. I recognized the pattern from the true crime shows I watched. He was a romance scammer targeting wealthy, bored housewives. He promised them a life of European luxury, manipulated them into draining their marital assets, and then, if he followed the usual script, he would vanish with the money the second the final wire went through, leaving the woman holding the bag. Monique thought she was a criminal mastermind, but she was just another mark. But Charles Sterling made one fatal miscalculation. He was stealing from Marcus Brooks, and Marcus Brooks belonged to me. I gripped the phone tightly, the shock quickly burning away, replaced by a blinding, righteous fury. The kind of fury that a mother bear feels when a predator steps into her cave. I didn't feel old anymore. I didn't feel tired. I felt lethal. Keisha, I said, my voice eerily calm. When is Marcus expecting his next FaceTime call? Keisha swallowed hard, looking at the digital clock on the bedside table. Today at noon. He usually calls while he's eating lunch. Good, I said, handing her the phone. You're going to answer it. What? Keisha backed away, terrified. No, I can't do this anymore. You have the proof. Just show it to him. If I show this to Marcus right now, he will panic, I explained sharply. He will call the bank, he will call Monique, and he will tip them off. If Charles knows we're onto him before the final transfer clears, he will move the money into the crypto accounts, and Marcus will never see a dime of it again. We have to freeze the money, but to do that, we need the authentication codes that are going to be sent to this phone. I stepped into Keisha's space, looking her dead in the eye. You said your mother is facing eviction? I asked. Keisha nodded, tears spilling over her eyelashes again. If you help me stop this, I vowed, my voice ringing with absolute certainty, I will personally pay your mother's back rent for an entire year. You will never have to take a humiliating job like this again, but I need you to be the actress you claim to be. I need you to be Monique for just a few more days. I need you to be my inside woman. Keisha looked at the burner phone in her hand. She looked at the puddle of ruined makeup on her face in the vanity mirror. Then she took a deep, shuddering breath, her spine straightening as the terrified girl retreated and the actress stepped forward. Okay, Keisha said, her voice steadying. What's my motivation, Mama Clara? I smiled, a cold, dangerous smile that didn't reach my eyes. Survival, child, and a whole lot of revenge. The rain started just before noon, a heavy, relentless Georgia downpour that turned the sky the color of bruised iron. Inside the Buckhead house, the atmosphere was thicker than the humidity outside. I sat on the edge of the master bed, out of frame of the laptop camera, watching Keisha prepare for the performance of her life. She had reapplied the contouring makeup, slipped into a silk blouse, and opened the deepfake application on the burner phone. At exactly 12:05 p.m., Marcus's name lit up on the laptop screen. An incoming FaceTime call. Keisha took a deep breath, her chest rising and falling rapidly. She looked at me. I gave her a single, firm nod. Action. She clicked answer. I watched in horrified fascination as the technology took over. On the laptop screen, the image wasn't Keisha. It was Monique. The AI flawlessly mapped Monique's features, her nose, her eyes, the exact curve of her jaw, over Keisha's face. When Keisha smiled, the digital Monique smiled. When Keisha blinked, the digital Monique blinked. It was seamless. It was demonic. Hey, babe! Marcus's voice filled the room, sounding stressed but instantly relieved to see his wife. He was sitting in his office, a whiteboard covered in complex coding equations behind him. Sorry I'm calling a little late. The server migration is a nightmare today. Oh, honey, don't apologize, Keisha said. Her voice was terrifyingly perfect. She had nailed the alto pitch and the slight vocal fry at the end of the sentence. You work so hard. I'm just taking a quick break from organizing the pantry. It's a mess in there. You're amazing. Did you talk to my mom today? I held my breath. Keisha didn't miss a beat. She reached up, touching her left collarbone exactly as the dossier instructed. I did, Keisha lied smoothly. She dropped by to bring some leftover ribs. You know Clara, always trying to feed us. I told her we were fine, but she insisted. God bless her, Marcus laughed, rubbing his tired eyes. Listen, about those investment forms you needed me to e-sign this morning, the link expired. Do you need me to log into the portal and do it now? My stomach plummeted. The final wire transfer. Charles was making his move. Keisha's eyes flicked to me in panic. I aggressively slashed my hand across my throat. Cut it off. Delay him. Actually, babe, don't worry about it. Keisha pivoted effortlessly, her digital face projecting absolute calm. The broker said the window for that specific mutual fund closed for the day. We'll tackle it on Friday when you have more time. I don't want you stressing over portfolios while your servers are crashing. Marcus let out a heavy sigh of relief. You're a lifesaver, Monty. Seriously, I don't know what I'd do without you handling all this back-end stuff. You're the best. I love you, Mark. Go save the tech world. I'll see you at dinner. Love you too. Bye. The screen went black. Keisha dropped the burner phone onto the bed as if it had burned her hand. She put her head between her knees, gasping for air. I can't believe I just did that. I just lied straight to his face. You bought us time, I said, my voice steady, though my own heart was hammering against my ribs. You did exactly what you had to do. I walked over to the window, watching the rain lash against the glass. The illusion was flawless, which meant the trap Monique and Charles had set was foolproof. If Marcus had signed those forms today, the money would have been gone by 1 p.m., untraceable. We need intel, I muttered, pulling out my own phone. I scrolled to David's contact and hit call. Because of the time difference, it would be late afternoon in London. He answered on the second ring. Mom, are you okay? Did you confront her? I have a situation, David, and I need you to listen to me very carefully, I said, pacing the length of the bedroom. The woman in the house is a hired actress, a decoy. Monique is using artificial intelligence to fake video calls with your brother. Wait, what? An actress? David's voice spiked in disbelief. Mom, this sounds insane. It gets worse, I cut him off, keeping my voice brutally clinical. Monique isn't just having an affair. She and that man you saw, Charles Sterling, have liquidated Marcus's 401k and taken out a massive line of credit against this house. They are trying to wire $750,000 to an offshore account in the Cayman Islands. The silence on the line was deafening. I could hear the faint hum of London traffic in the background. When David finally spoke, his voice had lost all its warmth. It was the icy, calculated tone of a pilot dealing with a catastrophic engine failure. How much time do we have? Days, I said. Maybe less. They need Marcus's final authorization, which we just delayed. But Charles is getting restless. David, you work for the airlines. You have access to the international manifest databases, don't you? Technically, only for my airline and our Sky Team partners. But I know guys in TSA and Customs. I can make some calls. I need you to run the name Charles Sterling, I ordered. Find out where he is staying in London. Find out when their return flight is. I need to know his next move before he makes it. Give me 2 hours, David said. And Mom, when Marcus finds out, it's going to break him. I know, I whispered, the maternal ache returning to my chest. But better a broken heart than a broken life. We will pick up the pieces later. Just find Charles. I hung up. For the next 48 hours, Keisha and I lived in a state of high-alert paranoia. She moved into the guest bedroom, claiming to Marcus that she was fighting off a bad cold and didn't want to get him sick. It was a brilliant excuse that kept him from touching her or expecting any physical intimacy, allowing Keisha to maintain the charade while we monitored the encrypted email server on the burner phone. Wednesday arrived, bringing with it a suffocating tension. According to the emails we had read, Wednesday was the day the 401k funds legally cleared the holding period. The money was now liquid, sitting in Marcus and Monique's joint account, ripe for the picking. At 2 p.m., a new email pinged on the secure server. Keisha and I huddled over the small screen. The sender was C. Sterling. Darling, the email read, the funds are fully liquid. I am initiating the wire to the Cayman Trust now. Because of the size of the transfer, The bank's fraud department is requiring a two-factor authentication code. They are sending it to your U.S. number to ensure it's not an international hack. Text it to me the second you get it. This is it, my love. Freedom. Oh my God, Keisha whispered. He's doing it. Monique must have left her primary USSIM card in this burner phone, I deduced, staring at the device. If she took her phone to London and turned on international roaming, a ping from an overseas IP address would automatically freeze the bank account. She's bypassing the security. Just as I finished the sentence, the burner phone vibrated. A text message banner dropped down from the top of the screen. Chase fraud alert. Your one-time authorization code for a wire transfer of $750,000 is 849211. Do not share this code with anyone. We have it, Keisha breathed, her hand hovering over the screen. We have the key. All we have to do is delete the text. If Charles doesn't get the code, the transfer fails. No, I said sharply, grabbing her wrist. If we just delete it, Charles will think there's a network error. He'll keep trying. He'll call Monique on her hotel phone, she'll realize the decoy has gone rogue, and they will find another way to drain the accounts before we can get the bank to freeze them legally. We need to lock him out permanently. I took the phone from her hands. Log into the banking portal. We have the phone, which means we can trigger a forgot password reset. We change the passwords, lock the accounts, and transfer the liquid funds into a secure escrow that only Marcus can access. Keisha quickly tapped the screen, opening the banking app. As she waited for the reset email to arrive in the inbox, she began scrolling absent-mindedly through Charles's older emails, looking for the account numbers. Mama Clara, Keisha said suddenly, her brow furrowing. Look at this. She tapped on an email Charles had sent Monique 2 weeks ago. It was a forwarded confirmation from a luxury travel concierge service. It's just their flight itinerary, I said dismissively, keeping my eye out for the bank's reset link. They fly back to Atlanta on Friday. No, look closer, Keisha insisted, zooming in on the PDF attachment. This isn't a return flight to Atlanta. This is Charles's personal itinerary. I squinted at the screen. The reservation was booked under Charles Sterling. Departing, London Heathrow, LHR, Friday, 8 a.m. Arriving Zurich Airport, ZRH, Switzerland. Passenger count 1. Class first. Ticket type, one way. The silence in the bedroom was profound. The only sound was the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway. I read the document again, my brain struggling to process the sheer audacity of what I was looking at. Switzerland. 1 passenger. One way. He's not taking her, Keisha whispered, her eyes wide with a mixture of horror and vindication. All those emails about buying a house in Mayfair, about running away together. It was all a lie. The pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. Charles Sterling was a phantom. He had spent months buttering up a vain, greedy Buckhead housewife, convincing her to betray her husband and steal her family's fortune. But a professional grifter doesn't share his loot. He needed Monique to authorize the wire transfer because her name was on the joint accounts. But once that $750,000 hit the offshore Cayman Trust, a trust he undoubtedly controlled exclusively, Monique was dead weight. He had booked a flight to Zurich for 8 a.m. Friday. I remembered David telling me that his flight, the flight Monique was supposed to be taking back to Atlanta to resume her perfect life, didn't depart until 11 a.m. Charles was going to wake up in their London hotel on Friday morning, kiss Monique goodbye, tell her he was going to finalize the paperwork at the bank, and head straight to Heathrow. By the time Monique realized he wasn't coming back, Charles would be touching down in the Swiss Alps with Marcus's life savings, leaving her stranded in London with nothing but a maxed-out credit card and a red Birkin bag. The scammer was scamming the scammer. I let out a low, breathy chuckle. It wasn't a happy sound. It was the sound of terrible cosmic irony. She burned her whole life down for a man who is going to abandon her at the airport, Keisha said, shaking her head. I almost feel bad for her. Don't, I snapped, my voice hard as flint. She made her bed. Now she's going to lie in it. But she is not going to furnish it with my son's money. The reset email from the bank finally pinged in the inbox. Change the passwords, I ordered Keisha. Lock it all down. Set up a dual authorization requirement for any wire transfers, requiring a physical signature at a branch in Atlanta. Charles is done. He can't touch a dime. Keisha's fingers flew across the digital keyboard. Within 5 minutes, Marcus's financial portfolio was sealed tighter than Fort Knox. Almost immediately, the burner phone started ringing. It was a FaceTime audio call from an international number. Charles. Keisha looked at me, panicked. What do I do? Answer it, I said, stepping closer to the microphone. Audio only. Sound like you're in a panic. Keisha swiped the green button. Hello? She said, perfectly mimicking Monique's breathless voice. Monique, what the hell is going on? Charles's voice was smooth, but laced with a sharp edge of irritation. The bank portal just kicked me out. It says the password has been changed and the account is frozen pending physical verification. Did you do something? Charles, I don't know. Keisha acted beautifully, her voice trembling. Marcus came home early for lunch. He was looking for some tax documents. He must have tried to log in and tripped the security system. I can't ask him about it without looking suspicious. I heard Charles curse under his breath. The mask of the sophisticated European lover was slipping. Damn it, Monique, I told you to keep him away from the accounts. We are so close. What do we do? Keisha whimpered. Nothing. Do nothing, Charles commanded, his voice tight. If the account requires physical verification, I can't bypass it from London. You're flying back on Friday. The second you land in Atlanta, you go straight to the bank. Tell them you forgot your password and need the hold lifted. Then we initiate the wire again. Do you understand me? Yes, Keisha said meekly. Yes, I understand. Just play the perfect wife for 2 more days, darling. I'll see you soon. He hung up. Keisha dropped the phone on the bed, exhaling a massive breath. He bought it. He thinks Marcus accidentally locked it. I looked at the phone, my mind already 10 steps ahead. Charles was going to stay in London, waiting for Monique to return to Atlanta to unlock the money. He wasn't going to get on that flight to Switzerland on Friday because he hadn't secured his payout yet, which meant on Friday afternoon, Monique was going to walk off that plane at Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport, believing her lover was waiting for her and believing she was about to become a millionaire. Call David, I told Keisha, my eyes narrowing as the final pieces of my plan snapped together. Tell him to make sure he's the pilot flying that route back to Atlanta on Friday. What are we going to do? Keisha asked. I picked up the printed itinerary of Charles's Swiss escape. I folded it neatly into a square and slipped it into my purse. We are going to pick my daughter-in-law up from the airport, I said, a grim, terrifying smile spreading across my face. And we are going to introduce her to the real world. Here is the highly detailed continuation for Part 5, bringing the story to its explosive second climax. I have maintained Clara's commanding voice and the intense, slow-burn pacing to deliver a deeply satisfying emotional payoff for your audience. Thursday evening descended on Atlanta like a suffocating wet blanket. The rain hadn't stopped all day, drumming a relentless, angry rhythm against the windows of my house. I was in the kitchen, brewing a pot of strong black coffee for myself and Keisha, who was hiding out in the guest room, when the heavy thud of knuckles pounding on my front door startled me. It wasn't a polite knock. It was the frantic, aggressive pounding of someone who was about to kick the door off its hinges. I set the coffee pot down, wiped my hands on my apron, and walked to the foyer. I checked the peephole. It was Marcus. He was soaking wet, not wearing a jacket, his chest heaving as if he had sprinted all the way from his car. I unlocked the deadbolt and pulled the door open. Marcus, baby, what on earth? He didn't hug me. He didn't even step inside. He just stood on my porch, the rain plastering his hair to his forehead, looking at me with a mixture of heartbreak and a terrifying, cold fury I had never seen in my son before. How could you? He asked, his voice shaking. It was a raw, wounded sound that pierced straight through my chest. How could I what? Come inside out of the rain, you're shivering, I said, reaching for his arm. He violently flinched away from my touch. Don't touch me. He reached into his soaked pocket, pulled out his phone, and shoved the screen toward my face. Monique sent this to me an hour ago. She found it in a hidden folder on your iCloud account. Tell me this isn't real, Mom. Tell me you didn't do this. I took the phone, my hands steady despite the ice-cold dread pooling in my stomach. I pressed play. The video on the screen was me. It was my face, my graying hair pulled back into my signature bun, wearing the very daisy-embroidered apron I had on right now. I was sitting in my own kitchen. Marcus is too naive to manage his own wealth, the digital version of me said. The voice was mine, but the cadence was completely wrong. flat, lacking my southern inflection. He gives everything to that spoiled wife of his. I deserve that money. I raised him. So yes, I forged the power of attorney. I initiated the HELOC transfer. By the time they realize the 401k is gone, I'll be far away from Atlanta. It's my money. I earned it. The video ended. I stared at the black screen. The sheer, unadulterated evil of it took my breath away. Monique had realized the bank accounts were frozen. Charles must have panicked. And Monique, sitting in a hotel room in London, desperate to deflect the blame and secure the money, had used her artificial intelligence software to create a deepfake of me. She was trying to frame me for the financial theft she was committing, hoping Marcus would have me arrested, completely removing me from the chessboard so she could unlock the accounts. It was the ultimate betrayal. She didn't just want to steal his money, she wanted to destroy his mother. "Well?" Marcus demanded, tears mixing with the rain on his cheeks. "Did you take my retirement, Mom? Are you trying to ruin my family?" I looked up at my tall, brilliant, broken son. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I felt a supernatural calm wash over me. The time for hiding was over. "Marcus," I said, my voice dropping to a low, commanding register that I hadn't used since he was a teenager acting out. "Step inside my house, right now." He hesitated, but the authority in my voice compelled him. He stepped into the foyer. I closed and locked the door behind him. "Look at the video again," I instructed, handing the phone back to him. "Look at the hands of the woman speaking. Look at them closely." Marcus frowned, swiping his thumb to replay the video. He squinted at the screen. "My hands have arthritis, Marcus. The knuckles on my left hand are permanently swollen from 40 years of nursing," I said quietly. "The woman in that video has smooth, flawless hands. And look at the shadows around the jawline. It blurs every time she speaks." Marcus stared at the screen, the gears in his engineering mind finally beginning to turn, analyzing the pixels rather than the emotion. It's an artifact, a rendering glitch." "It's a deepfake, Marcus," I said. "And I didn't make it. Your wife did." "Monique? Why would Monique make a fake video of you stealing our money? That doesn't make any sense." He ran a hand over his wet face, completely overwhelmed. "Mom, Monique is at home right now. She's sick in the guest room. I just talked to her through the door before I came here." "No, honey," I said, my voice softening with profound sorrow. "Monique is not at home. Monique has been in London since last Thursday. She is with a man named Charles Sterling, and the woman who has been sleeping under your roof, kissing you good morning, and pretending to be sick in your guest room, is an actress." Marcus stared at me like I had lost my mind. "An actress? Mom, what are you talking about?" I didn't answer him. I turned toward the hallway. "Keisha, come out here, please." The door to my guest room creaked open. Footsteps padded softly down the hardwood floor. Marcus turned his head. When Keisha stepped into the light of the foyer, the air was sucked out of the room. She wasn't wearing Monique's designer clothes. She was wearing sweatpants and a plain white t-shirt. She had no makeup on, and her natural, tightly coiled hair was exposed. But the face, the bone structure, the eyes, the lips, was an undeniable, terrifying mirror image of his wife. Marcus literally stumbled backward, his back hitting the front door. All the color drained from his face. What is this? Moni? My name is Keisha," she said, her voice shaking, tears welling in her eyes. "I'm so sorry, Marcus. I was hired. I didn't know she was stealing from you. I thought she was a government agent. I swear to God I didn't know." For the next 2 hours, sitting at my kitchen table, I dismantled my son's reality. I showed him the theatrical dossier. I showed him the burner phone with the AI application. And finally, I showed him the encrypted emails from Charles Sterling, the details of the HELOC loan, the liquidation of the 401k, and the one-way ticket to Switzerland Charles had secretly booked for himself. Marcus sat in silence. He didn't yell. He didn't throw anything. He just stared at these documents, his brilliant mind processing the sheer architectural scale of his wife's betrayal. Watching a grown man's heart break is a terrible thing. Watching your own son's heart break is an agony I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy. When he finally looked up, his eyes were completely hollow. The naive, trusting boy was gone. "She tried to frame you," Marcus whispered, his voice hoarse. "She was going to let me send my own mother to prison, just so she could run away with my money." She is a predator, Marcus, I said, reaching across the table to grip his hand. It was ice cold. But she made a mistake. She underestimated us. I froze the accounts yesterday. Charles can't get the money without a physical signature at the bank here in Atlanta. So they're coming back, Marcus realized, his jaw tightening. David confirmed it an hour ago. I nodded. Charles realized he couldn't trust Monique to handle the bank teller alone. He canceled his Zurich flight from London. He bought a ticket to escort Monique back to Atlanta tomorrow. But I slid Charles's new itinerary across the table. He booked a connecting flight out of Atlanta to Geneva, departing just 3 hours after they land. He's going to march her to the bank, take the wire transfer, and leave her at the terminal. Marcus stared at the paper. Slowly, a cold, dangerous resolve settled over his features. He looked at me, and I saw the reflection of my own matriarchal fire in his eyes. "What time does their flight land?" he asked. Friday afternoon at Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport was a chaotic sea of humanity. The international arrivals terminal was packed with families holding balloons, weary business travelers, and the constant droning announcements over the intercom. I stood near the frosted glass doors of the customs exit. Marcus stood to my right, his posture rigid, his hands shoved deep into the pockets of his dark coat. Keisha stood to my left, wearing a baseball cap pulled low, her arms crossed defensively over her chest. At 3:15 p.m., my phone buzzed. A text from David, who had piloted the Delta flight from Heathrow. They're off the plane, heading through customs now. TSA and Port Authority police are standing by at my signal. "They're coming," I murmured. Marcus didn't blink. He just kept his eyes locked on the sliding doors. 10 minutes later, the doors slid open, and there she was. Monique looked like she had just stepped off a runway in Milan. She wore a tailored beige trench coat, oversized Dior sunglasses, and that obnoxiously bright red Birkin bag slung over her forearm. Walking a half step ahead of her was Charles Sterling. He matched David's description perfectly. Tall, impeccably tailored suit, thick silver hair, projecting an aura of arrogant, unearned wealth. They were arguing. We were standing behind a large digital advertising pillar, close enough to hear them as they cleared the crowd. "I don't understand why we can't go to the bank together, Charles," Monique hissed, her voice tight with panic. "Why are you taking your luggage to Terminal E? The bank is in Buckhead." "Keep your voice down, Monique," Charles snapped, checking his gold Rolex. The suave lover routine was completely gone. He looked like a cornered rat. "I told you, I have an urgent meeting with the Swiss brokers that I have to take from the airport lounge. You take an Uber to the bank, sign the release forms, initiate the wire to the Cayman account, and I will meet you at the hotel tonight. It's a simple administrative error. Just fix it." "You promised we were doing this together," she pleaded, grabbing his sleeve. "I left my husband for you. I left my son." "And you will have your millions by tonight, darling. Just do what I say," Charles barked, ripping his arm out of her grasp. He turned to walk toward the international departure trains. He didn't make it 3 steps. David, still wearing his sharp pilot's uniform, stepped out from behind a concrete column, directly into Charles's path. 2 armed airport police officers flanked him. "Charles Sterling?" David asked, his voice echoing with absolute authority. Charles froze, his eyes darting toward the exits. "Yes? Is there a problem, Captain?" "There's a massive problem," David said, his eyes narrowing with disgust. "You're detained under suspicion of international wire fraud and attempted grand larceny. Hands where we can see them." Monique gasped, taking a stumbling step backward. "What? No! There's a mistake! Charles, tell them!" "The only mistake, Monique," a deep, cold voice echoed through the terminal. Monique whipped her head around. Marcus stepped out from behind the advertising pillar. He didn't look angry. He looked entirely dead inside. Monique's sunglasses slipped down her nose. The color drained from her perfectly contoured face. "Marcus, what are you doing here?" "I came to see my wife," Marcus said, his voice terrifyingly calm. He gestured to his left. "But it turns out she's been with me all week." I stepped out from behind the pillar, and I pulled Keisha out with me. Keisha took off her baseball cap. Monique looked at me, her eyes widening in pure horror. Then her gaze shifted to Keisha. "Seeing your exact physical duplicate, the alibi you thought was safely hidden away in your suburban home, standing next to the husband you are currently trying to rob in the middle of an international airport." It broke her brain. Monique literally dropped her red Birkin bag. It hit the linoleum floor with a heavy, expensive thud. "No," Monique whispered, her knees visibly shaking. "No, this is a deepfake?" I offered, stepping forward, closing the distance between us. I towered over her, channeling every ounce of matriarchal fury I had been storing up for a week. Or maybe an administrative error? "Tell me, Monique, which lie are we going with today?" "Marcus, please," Monique cried, suddenly lunging toward him, tears streaming down her face. She tried to grab his coat. "He tricked me! Charles tricked me! He brainwashed me, Mark! I didn't want to do this. He forced me." "Don't touch me," Marcus said, stepping back as if she were radioactive. "He didn't force you to forge my signature. He didn't force you to hire an actress to raise our son. And he didn't force you to make a video framing my mother for a federal crime." Monique choked on a sob, looking wildly between Charles, who was currently being handcuffed and read his Miranda rights against a concrete wall, and Marcus. "The accounts are frozen, Monique." Marcus delivered the final, fatal blow. "The house is locked. I filed for emergency custody of Leo this morning, and the judge granted it. You have nothing." Monique fell to her knees, right there in the middle of Hartsfield-Jackson Airport, wailing. The glamorous, arrogant woman who thought she was smarter than everyone else was reduced to a pathetic, shivering heap on the floor. Travelers were stopping, pointing, taking out their phones to record the spectacle. I looked down at her. I didn't feel pity. I felt justice. I reached into my purse, pulled out Charles's printed itinerary to Geneva, and let it flutter down onto her lap. "You sold your soul, your husband, and your child for a man who bought a one-way ticket to leave you behind," I said, my voice cutting through her sobs so clearly that only she could hear it. "You played a very wicked game, Monique, but you forgot one thing." She looked up at me, her mascara running down her cheeks in thick black rivers. "You forgot," I whispered, "who deals the cards in my family." I turned my back on her. I linked my arm through Marcus's, and with David and Keisha following close behind, we walked toward the exit, stepping out into the bright, clear Atlanta afternoon. The storm had finally broken, and the sky was a brilliant, unblemished blue. We had a lot of healing to do, a lot of pieces to put back together. But as we walked to the car, leaving the wreckage of Monique's lies behind us, I knew one thing for sure. My family was safe, and nobody messes with Clara Brooks's family and gets away with it. Here is the final chapter of our story, Part 6. I have maintained the slow, immersive pacing, the rich emotional depth of Clara's narrative voice, and the specific Southern atmosphere to bring the story to a satisfying, empowering close. This section wraps up the legal, emotional, and thematic threads, ending with the direct YouTube call to action for your audience. The storm that ravaged Atlanta that Thursday finally broke, leaving behind a sky so clear and blue it almost felt like an apology from the heavens. But in the real world, the skies don't just clear up after a hurricane of betrayal. You don't just wake up the next morning and pretend the house didn't almost blow down. You have to step out into the mud, assess the wreckage, and start laying down new bricks. The weeks following the confrontation at Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport were some of the most exhausting of my life. It was a blur of sterile courtrooms, federal investigators, and the harsh fluorescent lights of lawyers' offices. When the Port Authority police put Charles Sterling in handcuffs, they didn't just catch a man trying to steal my son's 401k. They pulled the thread on a massive international web of wire fraud. Charles, it turned out, had a string of aliases longer than a CVS receipt. The FBI got involved the moment they discovered the use of advanced AI deepfakes to forge financial authorizations across state and international lines. Federal prosecutors don't play games. Charles was denied bail, locked up in a federal holding facility, facing a minimum of 20 years. Monique, the woman who thought she was the mastermind of her own grand escape, found out very quickly what happens when the illusion shatters. Without Charles's phantom money, she had nothing. Marcus's lawyers moved with the ruthless efficiency of a military strike. Because she had attempted to completely drain their marital assets and abandon her child to flee the country, the divorce proceedings were brutal and swift. The judge granted Marcus full legal and physical custody of Leo. Monique was allowed only supervised visitation, heavily restricted due to the fact that she was deemed a flight risk. But the hardest part wasn't the legal battle. The hardest part was watching her fall from grace in the eyes of the society she cared so much about. The Buckhead PTA mothers, the women she used to sip mimosas with while Keisha played her decoy, dropped her the moment the scandal hit the local gossip mill. People forgive a lot of things in the South, but they do not forgive a mother who tries to frame her own mother-in-law to steal her child's future. The last time I saw Monique was at the final divorce deposition. She sat across the mahogany table, looking small. The designer clothes hung loose on her frame. The arrogant, untouchable glow was completely gone, replaced by the hollow, terrified look of a woman who had gambled her entire universe and lost. She looked at me, her eyes begging for some sort of intervention, some drop of the maternal grace I used to extend to her. I looked back at her, my face a mask of polite, impenetrable stone. I had given her my grace for 6 years. She had used it to try and dig my son's grave. The well was dry. While Monique faced the ruin she had built for herself, I had a promise to keep on the other side of town. 2 weeks after the airport showdown, I drove my Honda Accord back down to East Atlanta Village. I didn't park in the shadows this time. I parked right in front of a small, unpretentious 24-hour diner, the kind of place that smells like burnt coffee and bleach, where the waitresses call you sugar and mean it. Keisha was sitting in a booth by the window, nervously shredding a paper napkin into tiny white ribbons. She looked up when the bell above the door chimed, her posture immediately stiffening when she saw me. I slid into the vinyl booth across from her. I didn't say a word at first. I just opened my purse, pulled out a thick, crisp white envelope, and slid it across the Formica table. Keisha looked at it as if it were a live grenade. "What is this?" "Open it," I instructed gently. Her trembling fingers broke the seal. Inside was a cashier's check. It was enough to cover her mother's back rent for the entire year, plus enough to keep the lights on and the groceries stocked for the next 6 months. Keisha stared at the numbers, a tear instantly tracking through the dust of her natural complexion. "Mrs. Brooks, I can't take this. After everything that happened, after what I was a part of." "You were a pawn, Keisha," I said, reaching across the table to lay my hand over hers. My arthritic knuckles felt heavy against her smooth skin. "You were desperate, and my daughter-in-law weaponized your desperation. But when the fire got hot, you didn't run. You stood by me. You helped me save my son's life. I am a woman of my word. This is your mother's security." Keisha put her face in her hands and wept. It wasn't the terrified sobbing I had seen in Monique's kitchen. It was the heavy, exhausting release of a young woman who had been carrying the weight of the world on her shoulders for too long. I let her cry. As a nurse, I know that some wounds need to bleed before they can be bandaged. When she finally wiped her eyes with the shredded napkin, I reached into my purse one more time and pulled out a business card. I slid it across the table to sit next to the check. "My late husband was a lot of things," I said softly. "But above all, he was a man who loved the arts. When he was sick, his oncologist was a man named Dr. Aris. Dr. Aris's husband happens to be the casting director for the Alliance Theater right here in Midtown." Keisha's eyes widened, recognizing the name of one of the most prestigious theater companies in the Southeast. "I made a phone call," I continued. "I told him about a young, incredibly talented actress who can slip into a role so flawlessly she could fool a mother. They are holding open auditions for their winter production of A Raisin in the Sun. You have a slot next Tuesday at 10 a.m. I don't know what to say," Keisha whispered, completely overwhelmed. "You didn't have to do this for me. You owed me nothing but the check." "I don't believe in destroying people just because I have the power to do it, Keisha," I said, my voice carrying the steady, grounding rhythm of my faith. "Monique chose destruction. I choose elevation. Take the audition. Use that talent of yours to tell the truth on a stage, instead of living a lie in the dark. Make your mama proud." She looked at me, a profound, fierce gratitude burning in her eyes. "I will, Mama Clara. I promise you, I will." I smiled, a real, genuine smile. I drank my coffee, left a $20 bill on the table for the waitress, and walked out into the sunshine. I had paid my debts. The ledger was clean. The hardest journey, however, wasn't in a courtroom or a diner. It was in the quiet, echoing spaces of my son's home. Healing is not a cinematic montage. It doesn't happen over a 3-minute pop song. Healing is Marcus sitting on the floor of his empty master bedroom at 2 a.m, staring at the wall. Healing is answering the tough, innocent questions from a 6-year-old boy who doesn't understand why his mother suddenly lives in a small apartment and can only visit on Saturday afternoons with a court-appointed monitor sitting in the corner. But Marcus Brooks is his mother's son. He didn't break. He bent, he cracked, but he did not shatter. He didn't rush out to download dating apps to fill the void. He didn't try to replace Monique. Instead, he poured every ounce of his massive heart into being a father. He learned how to braid Leo's hair. He joined the PTA himself, ignoring the whispers of the buckhead mothers, showing up to the bake sales with store-bought cookies and his head held high. And slowly, the color began to return to his cheeks. The dark circles under his eyes faded. The house that used to feel like a sterile museum began to feel like a home. There were toys left on the stairs, laughter echoing in the hallways, and the smell of real food cooking in the kitchen. Fast forward to a crisp Sunday afternoon in late November, 6 months after the world almost ended. I was standing in the backyard of Marcus's house. The air was cool, carrying the sharp, woody scent of fallen oak leaves. David had flown in on a red-eye from Paris, and he was currently wrestling with Leo in the grass, both of them covered in dirt and laughing so hard they couldn't breathe. Marcus was standing by the massive steel grill on the patio, wearing an old college sweatshirt, expertly flipping a row of burgers and hot links. I walked out of the house, carrying a massive tray of my famous Southern BBQ ribs. "Make room, Pitmaster," I teased, bumping Marcus out of the way with my hip. Marcus laughed, a deep, rich sound from his chest, and stepped aside. He looked at the ribs, then looked at me. "You know, Mom, I think I finally figured out the secret ingredient in the dry rub." "Oh, really?" I raised an eyebrow, setting the tray down. "Try me, tech genius." "It's not paprika," Marcus smiled, throwing an arm over my shoulder and pulling me into a tight hug. "It's stubbornness. Pure, unadulterated Brooks stubbornness." I leaned my head against his shoulder, closing my eyes as a profound wave of peace washed over my spirit. "Don't you ever forget it, baby." I stood there on the patio, watching my 2 boys and my grandson. We were a little bruised, a little battered, and our family portrait looked a lot different than it had a year ago. But the foundation was solid rock. The wolves had come to our door, dressed in designer clothes and armed with modern technology, but they hadn't realized that the shepherd was awake, and she was not afraid of the dark. Later that evening, after the boys had eaten themselves into a food coma and Leo was tucked safely into his bed, I found myself sitting alone on my own front porch in Atlanta. The neighborhood was quiet. The crickets were singing their twilight song. I sat in my rocking chair, a cup of chamomile tea warming my hands, and I thought about the sheer madness of it all. The burner phones, the deepfakes, the actress, the flight to Switzerland. It sounded like a movie, but the pain it caused was entirely real. We live in a world where people are so obsessed with the illusion of perfection, the perfect Instagram feed, the perfect marriage, the perfect bank account, that they will trade their own souls to keep the filter on. Monique wanted the illusion so badly she forgot how to live in reality. She forgot that you can't digitize love. You can't fake the rhythm of a family's heart. And you certainly can't outsmart a mother who is paying attention. And that is my story. The story of how my family was almost erased by a ghost in the machine, and how we fought tooth and nail to pull ourselves back into the light. I changed the names, of course. I changed the places. Marcus, David, Leo. Those aren't their real names on their birth certificates. But the truth of what happened to us is as real as the breath in my lungs. I didn't tell you this story to brag, and I certainly didn't tell it to drag another woman through the mud for the sake of gossip. I told it because I know I'm not the only one. I know there are women out there right now, mothers, grandmothers, wives, who are sitting in their kitchens, feeling that quiet, terrifying alarm bell ringing in their gut. You see the signs. You notice the mismatched details. You feel the cold draft coming from a closed door. But the world tells you that you're just being paranoid. The world tells older women that our instincts are just anxiety, that we don't understand how modern relationships work. I am here to tell you, trust your gut. God gave you that intuition for a reason. Do not let anyone, not a cheating spouse, not a manipulative daughter-in-law, and certainly not some fancy new technology, make you doubt what your own 2 eyes and your own spirit are telling you. I had to make a terrible choice. I had to choose between keeping the peace in my family or burning the house down to expose the rot in the foundation. I chose the fire, and yes, the flames hurt. Yes, it broke my son's heart, but a broken heart can be mended. A life stolen by lies is gone forever. I look back now, and I wonder, if I had ignored the smell of that cheap perfume, if I had ignored the way she typed on that phone, where would my son be today? Bankrupt? Alone? So I have to ask you. I want you to sit in my rocking chair for a minute and ask yourself the hard question. If you were me, if you were Clara, standing in that kitchen, watching a stranger wear your family's face, what would you have done? Would you have kept quiet to protect your son from a painful truth? Would you have confronted her right away and risked losing the money? Or would you have played the long game, sharpened your knives, and waited for the perfect moment to strike? I want to know your opinion. I read every single comment because every story we share is a lantern in the dark for someone else who might be walking through the same storm. Tell me your thoughts down below. Remember, the truth might cause a storm, but it is the only thing that will ever truly set you free. God bless you, protect your peace, and keep your eyes open. Until next time, this is Clara, signing off.